looking at a live picture of St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, where thousands are now congregating, getting ready for a special Mass one day after the death of Pope John Paul II.
Crowds have gathered to pray and to share remembrances of that pontiff. Good morning. Welcome back to MSNBC's continuing coverage of the death of Pope John Paul II. I'm Contessa Brewer. And I'm Bill Fitzgerald. Throughout the morning, we'll bring you perspective on the death of this Pope and a look ahead to what's coming in the next few weeks. Right now, we take a look at how the world is reacting to the passing of the pontiff. NBC's Steve Handelsman is in Vatican City with this report.
Bells tolled at the Vatican to signal the death of John Paul II. And in Madrid, and in Krakow, where Catholics felt a special bond with the Pope, who was a Pole and helped free the nation from communism.
Very important man in our life, in life of Poland.
People wept in Mexico, the world's second largest Catholic country. And the tears flowed in France. This was Notre Dame in Paris.
The passing of such a figurehead such as the Pope, I don't think anyone can honestly not be moved by it.
As night fell in Rome, the light still burned in John Paul's room, where he made signs of the cross till he lost consciousness and lost his life to infection and heart failure.
John Paul II, he loves you.
And what a life. Replacing John Paul will be impossible. He led the church for a generation, traveling more than any other pontiff, fighting for the poor and recently against the U.S.-led Iraq War. But President Bush attended a mass for the Pope in Washington and hailed him as a champion of freedom. Across America, Catholics mourn John Paul. This was Chicago. In Los Angeles, the Olympic torch was lit in L.A. Coliseum. In St. Peter's, where the Pope's death provoked song and prayer, will be a special Mass for John Paul II. The funeral will be at midweek. World leaders and as many as 1 million Catholics are expected to attend here in Rome. From Vatican City, I'm Steve Handelsman, NBC News.
Here at home, people are mourning the Pope at churches around the country. New Yorkers and tourists alike attended Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue as they were watched over by a giant picture of the Pope erected beside the main altar. The service that followed the Pope's death brought in thousands, many standing in the aisles and along back walls. In Dallas, Catholics congregated at churches where many lit candles and prayed. Vigils and prayer services were held statewide to remember John Paul II.
Overseas, people are marking this global news event in their own ways. Black flags at the birthplace of Jesus signal an official mourning period in the Holy Land. Kevin Perino is Newsweek's Jerusalem bureau chief, and he joins us now from there. Good morning to you, Kevin.
Good morning.
Now, one may forget that the population of Israel is only 2% Christian, but the Holy Land is there. How would you describe the mood there today?
The mood here is similar to what it is around the world. There are church services, as you mentioned, at the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. The largest remembrance is up in Nazareth, Jesus' boyhood home in the northern part of the country. And it's the same kind of thing that we're seeing around the world. It's bells tolling. It's the Catholics who are here, and there are about 100,000 Catholics in Israel going to pay their respects quietly.
Now, we saw so many cathedrals around the world, St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, in London, in Europe, really all over. Was there a similar vigil kept there as the Pope's health deteriorated yesterday? And if so, what was the reaction at the moment the death was announced?
There weren't really similar vigils like the ones that we saw in Vatican City and elsewhere, partly because Saturday in Israel is the Jewish Sabbath, and it's a day when people stay home, shops are closed, the streets are largely empty. And I went and took a walk around the old city of Jerusalem to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the traditional site of the crucifixion, yesterday. And there really weren't a lot more people there than usual. As I say, there were just a sort of small clutches of tourists quietly paying their respects.
Now, of all the things said about this Pope, he was a moral force. He was also a political one. He advocated rights for the Palestinians, and he also worked to improve relations between the Jewish people and Catholics specifically. What are they saying about this Pope today in a more political sense than perhaps a religious or spiritual one?
Yeah, one of the things that you hear over and over from Jewish people that you talk to about the Pope is his efforts to bridge that gap between the Catholic Church and the Jewish faith. And the thing that they bring up most often is his visit to the Holy Land in 2000 when he spent time in Jerusalem and up in the Galilee, and also, as you say, in the Palestinian territories. One of the people that we talked to is Rabbi Lau, who's the former chief rabbi of Israel, who showed the Pope around a little bit when he was here during that time. And the thing that he mentioned as being most significant to him is when the Pope went to the Western Wall, which is a holy site in Judaism in the Old City, and placed this prayer in the wall asking for forgiveness of the past sins of the Church. And that one of the things that the Jews bring up most often is some felt that during the 1940s, during the Holocaust, the Pope at the time, Pope Pius XII, didn't do enough. He was silent about the Holocaust, and that's something that caused a lot of animosity. And so when you talk to Rabbi Lau and when you talk to other Jewish people on the streets today, that's what they bring up, is his effort to sort of to bridge that gap.
Indeed, that image of him going up to that massive wall, this smaller, already hunched man just 5 years ago, already infirm with Parkinson's and other ailments, was quite a powerful one. What about, he actually met with Yasser Arafat 10 or 12 times. Did that play negatively with Israelis?
It did in some cases. He did do things. During that trip, he visited the Dheisheh refugee camp, which is a refugee camp just outside of Bethlehem, and he has been vocal about the need for a Palestinian state and the plight of the refugees. As you said, he sometimes made visits that leaders in Israel thought were propaganda visits. He went to Syria around the same time, and you heard some grumbling from Israeli leaders about whether he wasn't being used by the Syrian government. But all in all, you're not hearing that kind of thing in the last couple of days. The official statements from people like Sylvan Shalom, people like Vice Premier Shimon Peres are all remembering the Pope's humanitarian efforts, not his political statements.
And indeed, he was always consistent. He said he may be meeting with despots, he may be meeting with communists or capitalists or Democrats, but he said that peace is really the only route. And is that, are you getting a sense from people there that he was above all a man of peace and therefore a uniter?
That's exactly right. And, you know, I mentioned Rabbi Lau before, who we spoke with. He recalled telling a story of when he was in Italy in 1993, and he was going to visit, and the Pope heard that he was in town and invited him to the Vatican, and Rabbi Lau said, "I can't come to the Vatican because there are statues there, and viewing statues is against Jewish law." And so the Pope said, "No, don't worry about it. Come to my personal residence." And when he came, Rabbi Lau realized that the Pope had removed all the statues in his personal residence as a gesture, and it was something that he really appreciated. And the other thing during that visit is the Pope referred to the Jewish people as our older brother, and that's something, as you say, that was well appreciated here.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Every gesture counts, and he certainly made plenty of them in a lifetime. Well, thanks so much, Kevin Perino, Newsweek's Jerusalem Bureau Chief, joining us from Jerusalem. We appreciate your time this morning.
Stay with us for continuing coverage of the world's mourning of the death of Pope John Paul II.
And we're going to take another look live at the Vatican, the Basilica of St. Peter's now, where thousands have gathered for a special Mass set to begin in just about 50 minutes. It is a special week after Easter Mass, but this time it is obviously going to commemorate a very special Pope, a man beloved by Catholics and non-Catholics alike. The special Mass begins shortly for Pope John Paul II.
before her death, Pope John Paul II welcomed Mother Teresa to the Vatican. It was one of many visits that occurred between the pontiff and the nun, and sadly, one of the last. In 2003, Pope John Paul II beatified Mother Teresa in St. Peter's Square.
You're taking a live look at St. Peter's Square inside the Vatican City, inside the walls of Rome today, a very somber Sunday morning. A service set to begin in 45 minutes at 10:30 local time to honor Pope John Paul II, who died just about 12 hours ago after a long illness, after weekend vigils where tens of thousands of pilgrims and mourners came to that square to pray for his failing health and now to celebrate his death. That Mass set to begin in about 45 minutes. Contessa.
Millions in Europe have been streaming into churches to commemorate the life of John Paul II. Joining me from London is Con Coughlin, executive editor of the Sunday Telegraph. Con, nice to see you today.
Good morning, Contessa.
How are Europeans today reacting to the Pope's death?
Well, basically, throughout Europe, millions of people are going to church for special services that are being said for the Pope's life, to commemorate the Pope's life and to pray for his soul. In France, the bells at Notre Dame chimed 84 times for every year of the Pope's life. And here in Britain, every major church is having a service for his life.
I know, in fact, that there are several countries in Europe that have ordered days of mourning: Poland, Italy. What is Great Britain doing?
Well, here in Great Britain, we're actually about to start a general election campaign, which is supposed to be taking place in early May. And all the political parties have basically said that they're going to stop campaigning for a few days to give people a chance to mourn the death of the Pope and really to show respect to the life of the Pope over the last 20-odd years.
Con, I know that for many in Eastern Europe, the Pope was really a hero for his role in taking a stand against that iron fist of communism. How pivotal was he in the fall of communism?
He played a very, very important role. I mean, if we cast our minds back, Poland was one of the first countries to escape the yoke of Soviet rule, and the whole liberation movement in Poland, which is called Solidarity, that really triggered the other independence movements throughout Eastern Europe. And of course, the Pope, when he was a cardinal in Poland, played a very big part in encouraging Lech Walesa and the Solidarity movement. So East Europeans in particular hold him in high regard. And it was quite interesting to see overnight that Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the Soviet president at the time, again paying tribute to the courage and fortitude of the Pope during those difficult years.
I know that Europe is becoming a more ethnically diverse continent year by year. Xenophobia and racism are still big problems there on the continent. Pope John Paul really insisted on tolerance as a trait of Christianity. Did it resonate there, that message?
I think it did. I mean, I think throughout his papacy, he was reaching out not just to other Christians, but to other faiths. He worked hard to try and rebuild relations with the world's Jewish community, and he worked hard to build relations with the Islamic world. And I think it's very interesting to see that Islamic leaders have also been sending letters of condolence to the Vatican, have been praying for the Pope in Friday prayers at mosques around Europe. And so I think, in a sense, his death has helped again to make the different faiths aware of what they have in common rather than what their differences are.
Con, and we have been able to watch this Pope for the last several decades, almost 3 decades. And really with the advance of technology, satellite television, we've also been able to see his failing health. We knew back in February when he went into Gemelli Hospital what the updates were from the Vatican. We knew last week that he was getting into the last stage of his life. Still, do you think that even though we've seen all of this on television, we've seen his progression, do you think that Europeans were still a bit shocked when he finally died?
Well, I think if you look at the way the last days of the Pope has been covered here in Europe, I don't think many people were in any doubt as to really what was likely to happen. I think by the end of last week it was pretty clear that the Pope was in his final hours. He was making peace with God. He was saying goodbye to his close friends, particularly the Polish nuns and clerics that came from Poland to the Vatican with him when he first became Pope. So I think really we've been prepared for this moment, but even so it is a very sad moment, and as I say, I think you'll find that most churches throughout Europe will be packed today as people commemorate a quite remarkable life.
Con Coughlin, the executive editor of the Sunday Telegraph. Con, we appreciate you giving us a little window into the reactions from Europe. Thank you.
My pleasure, Contessa.
And stay with us for continuing coverage of the world's mourning the death of Pope John Paul II. We
take you back now live. A picture of St. Peter's Square within Vatican City. You can see the thousands of people who are gathering there. Really, since the Pope's failing health was announced, there has been a flow of pilgrims from all across the globe here to pay their last respects.
John Paul II's travels were known for shattering barriers, and his 1998 visit to Cuba was no different. His Holiness spent 5 days in the communist country, and as an act of deference, Fidel Castro declared a government holiday, giving the people of Cuba a chance to hear the pontiff's message.
A live picture now from St. Peter's Square in Vatican City. It is Sunday morning. Cardinal Angelo Sodano will lead the repose for the soul of the Holy Father in St. Peter's Square in just a little more than half an hour. You can see some of the thousands who are gathered there to pay their final respects to Pope John Paul II.
And thousands will come to St. Peter's Square for that special Mass, and it will be in honor of Pope John Paul II. Will be dedicated to him after his passing. When the official word of the Pope's death came from the Vatican, it was a somber moment for many Catholics and non-Catholics around the world and in Vatican City.
Gloria al Padre, e al Figlio, e allo Spirito Santo.
Come era nel principio, ora e sempre, nei secoli dei secoli. Amen.
Santo Padre Giovanni Paolo II è tornato alla casa del Padre.
Exules filii Eve, ad te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in ad lacrimarum valle.
And stay with us for continuing coverage of the world's mourning the death of Pope John Paul II.
Once again, pictures from Vatican City, St. Peter's Square. We are awaiting now the special Mass, the Requiem Mass for Pope John Paul II. MSNBC's coverage of the death of Pope John Paul will be back.
Pope John Paul II. Stay with MSNBC for continuing coverage.